Romans chapter 5 says, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. Yes, people sinned even before the law was given, but it was not counted as sin, because there was not yet any law to break. Still, everyone died, from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even those who did not disobey an explicit commandment of God, as Adam did. Now, Adam is a symbol, a representation of Christ, who is yet to come. But there is a great difference between Adam's sin and God's gracious gift. For the sin of this one man, Adam, brought death to many. But even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of forgiveness to many through this other man, Jesus Christ. And the result of God's gracious gift is very different from the result of that one man's sin. For Adam's sin led to condemnation, but God's free gift leads to our being made right with God, even though we are guilty of many sins. For the sin of this one man, Adam, caused death to rule over many. But even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of righteousness. For all who receive it will live in triumph over sin and death through this one man, Jesus Christ. Yes, Adam's one sin brings condemnation for everyone, but Christ's one act of righteousness brings a right relationship with God and new life for everyone. Because one person disobeyed God, many became sinners. But because one other person obeyed God, many will be made righteous. God's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace became more abundant.
Have you ever stopped to think about what it would have been like to be there? To be the religious leaders, this man, such a threat to everything you were trying to achieve. This man who taught against you and was gaining a following that you couldn't have. So you have him arrested and placed under trial, hoping for a death sentence, encouraging the crowd around you to call for his death. To be Pilate, this man brought before you, and you don't see a reason for him to be condemned. But you've been left with little choice. So you wash your hands of him and sentence him to death. To be Jesus' followers, his disciples. For 3 years, you followed him, hung off his every word, thought he would change the world, and then he's arrested. And you flee, wondering what it was all for. To be Mary, his mother, watching your son hang there, gasping for air, struggling with every breath, tears streaming down your face, your heart breaking as your oldest son hangs there, dying. To be the thief, knowing that you deserve this punishment, this pain. You lived a life of crime, causing hurt and pain for others. But this man next to you, he doesn't deserve this. What could lead someone to dish out such a punishment to such a good man. To be the centurion, the man whose job it was to oversee the person being put to death, to have a front row seat to his suffering, to his pain, to watch him die, and then to feel the earth shake, to realise who it was that you just put to death. Imagine that you are there, watching, experiencing the sights and sounds that came with the crucifixion, that came with Jesus' death. What was it all for? What was the point? Grace. The unmerited favour, kindness, and mercy of God. Grace is what it was all about. Grace was what caused Christ, an innocent man, to take our punishment, to take on what we deserved. Let's face it, no matter how good we think we are, grace is not something that we deserve. Grace is not something that we achieve. Grace costs us nothing. It cost Christ everything. In Romans chapter 5 verse 20 we read, God's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace became more abundant. Well, the NIV puts it like this, but where sin increased, grace increased all the more. Grace. Greater grace. The more we sin, the greater the grace that we experience. Maybe it is that we appreciate the grace of God all the more. Perhaps that is why addicts and criminals that find Jesus never take for granted the grace that was offered to them. Never take for granted what Jesus did on the cross. The cross that is offered to us is greater and more powerful than any sin that we have ever committed, whether it be as something as simple as telling a lie or as big as taking someone's life. God's grace is greater. And if God's grace is greater than our sin, then because of that same grace, we can experience the freedom that comes with that. The contemporary English version of Romans 5:20 speaks of the fact that God's grace is more powerful than our sin. God's grace overcomes our sin. And so we can have confidence in the fact that it can also overcome our sinful desires. We can have freedom from them. Sometimes we feel helpless. Sometimes we feel like the temptation is too great, but God's grace is greater and more powerful, and so we don't have to give in to temptation. We don't have to go on sinning, because in God's grace we experience freedom. Because God's grace is greater. And if God's grace is greater, then who are we to put restrictions on? Who are we to doubt whose God's grace can reach? Jesus died just as much for Pilate, for Judas, for the centurion, for the people that called for his death, as he did for his mother. for his faithful disciples, for Mary and Martha. The grace of God is for everyone. It is for those who have taken lives. It is for those who sell their bodies to make a living. It is for those who are trapped in addiction. It is for those who are lonely. It is for those who are at the end of their rope. It is for those who are lonely. It is for those who sit in judgment of others. It is for those that don't think they need it. It is for those who have grown up living in it. It is for those who put limits on it. And it is for those who take it for granted. No one is too far from God's grace. God's grace is for everyone, and we should never doubt it. We should never limit it. We should never take it for granted. We should never think that someone is too far from the grace of God, because God's grace is greater. God's grace is amazing. God's grace is a mystery. It is something that we will never fully understand. And then what is our response going to be to this amazing grace of God? To fall on our knees because of the amazing grace that is offered. Because his grace still amazes.